Alright, so today we're going to be looking at a totally interesting and totally bizarre case in history where Czechoslovakia could have had a colony, which is Czechoslovak Togo. Now, obviously, this is never going to happen because of Britain and France being in the room, but let's take a little dive and let's see if a Czechoslovak colony could have actually taken place, how it would have run, why they wanted it, and how it never obviously came to be. Alright, so history time, background time, or a history of trying to obtain it, not history of the actual place. Now, the idea of establishing a Czechoslovak colony came closest after the end of the First World War, when the Paris Peace Conference with the defeated Germany was taking place. Here it was decided, among other things, that the German Empire would be stripped of its overseas territories, which included today's Togo, then known as Togoland. In 1919, Havlasa published a booklet called Czechoslovak Overseas Colonies, and Havlasa is basically a Czechoslovak newspaper, or the Czechy Kolony Zeměřické, in which he identified Togo as the most suitable territory for colonization. One of the reasons why this particular area was to become a Czechoslovak colony was that the Tongolese population in the former German colony in 1912 numbered slightly over 1 million, and the area occupied roughly 2/3 of Czechoslovakia. Now, to give an idea, the area of Czechoslovakia at the time was 140,446 kilometers squared at the time of its creation, before it changed after World War II. But Togoland had the area of 90,400 kilometers square to this day. It was therefore thought that the Czechoslovak authorities would have no problem with administering the territory. This was to be achieved with the help of the experienced Czechoslovak legions returning from Siberia, across the Pacific Ocean, and across the Atlantic Ocean as well. While Togo still had a partial colonial administration and order left over from the Germans, which was familiar to the Czechs who had lived in German areas for several centuries in Austria-Hungary. There were over 60,000 Czechoslovak legionnaires on transit at the time, but due to delays and the Bolsheviks trying to run them down and just wanted to get home at that point, there was pretty much nobody left to govern the colony, if it was to be, but there would have been nobody to guarantee the safety of that colony, because the British and French already had everything done by 1919. By 1919, all the German colonies were gone. Now, possible administration. Let's see if the Czechoslovaks actually got there, what could have been. If Togo was to indeed become a colony of Czechoslovakia at the time, it was believed that iron ore and other goods such as cocoa or cacao, coffee, millet, and leather could be imported there from Czechoslovak ports in Germany, which seemed to be of great benefit for Czechoslovak factories at the time. And of course, Czechoslovakia is landlocked, but Germany was obviously required to let newly independent landlocked countries get some sort of port access, import-export, stuff like that, right? Through the Danube River. Some travelers, such as Wilhelm Nemec, had the idea of large companies like Skoda and CDK that could become involved in the colony and build their factories there, thus making use of the local labor force. Other proponents of the idea envisaged that the local population could be educated with the help of Czech teachers and Slovak teachers as well, right? Similar to what had been done in Zakarpathia, which is now part of Ukraine, but is what I like to call the pointy end of Czechoslovakia when they had it, right? Now, in Togo, Czechoslovaks also encountered disease typical to the African continent, such as sleeping sickness, yellow fever, and malaria, to a great extent for the first time because, well, they're in Africa, but... Alright, so the last thing that I want to touch on before we finish this, obviously couldn't be, video, because like I said, boy, those British and those French were hungry, but German postage stamps and they could have been Czechoslovak, but let's see. Now, there are cases that overprints of the CSP, or the Czechoslovak Postal Service stamp, appeared on German colonial stamps from Togo. The origins of this modification is unknown. It could have been a private modification, or it could have been by an unknown author at some point for surplus German stamps at the time, but nobody really knows. But what we do know is that this idea was never going anywhere. This idea could have never been a thing. Like, honestly, in my 29 years of existence, I believe some things, but I'm not believing that Czechoslovakia, a newly formed country, landlocked in the middle of Europe, with a language that only like no offense to the Czechs or the Slovaks at this point, but like only you guys speak it. It's a Slavikish kind of language. Not the hardest one to learn, but like you have everything running against you. And like I said, like honestly, the Togo was already connected to a British and French colony at the time, so it was kind of like clockwork. Like there was no presence of Czechoslovaks on the continent ever. Austria-Hungary did had a colonial venture, but it mostly focused on its European empire with the Czechs. So yeah, this was never gonna work out, but I like the effort though. I like that you tried. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed. Hope you learned something. And until next time, yes, my friend Rupert, I hope you enjoyed. And yeah, one of the craziest could have been, never been. I don't believe that. Like, if you're an alternate history hub guy or gal, you could probably make a scenario for that. But it's gonna be so hard. But hope you enjoyed. Hope you learned something. And yeah, bye bye.